Welcome, everybody, to Understanding Climate Change in 40 Minutes or Less. My name is Kristin, and we're representing Ideas for Us today. We are a global environmental nonprofit that focuses on solving global environmental challenges with local solutions. And what that means is a lot of education and action about different climate change issues and also solutions that we can take in our community. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of different sectors within climate change, but this amazing presentation was brought to you by our amazing international affairs organizing team, who will be presenting this information to you today. We're going to be covering a few essential topics that we thought were really important to the discussion of climate change, which encompasses a lot of different things. But today, we're going to be covering climate disasters, agriculture and climate change, ocean acidification and sea level rise, pollution and environmental issues, urbanization and deforestation, and then, of course, taking action in your community. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi, my name is Ashley Sullivan, and I will be discussing climate disasters. Next slide, please. So to understand climate disasters, we must first define it, and it's defined as a physical process or event that can harm human health, livelihood, or natural resources. To understand these physical processes and how they harm humans, we must look at what are some examples of climate disasters, why are they happening, and why are they happening so frequently, and who is affected. So some different types of climate disasters are hurricanes and tropical storms, floods, droughts, wildfires. And then we have tornadoes, landslides / mudslides, tsunamis and earthquakes, and heat waves. And to understand kind of how these things kind of work together and intersect, we can understand that some of the disasters are specific to some geographical locations, but the ripple effects of these disasters can affect and span to a broader area. So these events are happening more frequently due to human activities, such as the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, like burning fossil fuels such as coal, poor land usage influencing natural occurrences, such as a lack of flood prevention structures. We also have environmental issues with the industrial processes, such as mining. Finally, there's also agriculture, which decreases the soil health, and deforestation. And as you can see by the graph on the right, we can see that all of these issues and natural processes are interconnected, and they all have ripple effects on each other. Next slide, please. So to understand why this is an issue, we also have to look at who is most vulnerable to these impacts. And for these, we have low-income communities, indigenous peoples, coastal communities, children and elders in developing countries. For example, coastal communities can be greatly affected. There can be an earthquake in one location in the world, which can then create a tsunami, which can devastate these coastal communities. And while all people from varying demographics are affected, people who experience climate change can be disproportionately impacted, such as different marginalized communities. The graph on the right kind of explains how the rising greenhouse gas levels will affect the plants and how animals grow, and then the extreme weather and climate events and rising sea levels, which then all create these climate sensitive risks such as air quality, food and water insecurity, disease, extreme heat and weather, social impacts. And all of these are already issues that we can see present today, and they will only be heightened due to the increase in climate change.
All right, now we're going to transition to agriculture and climate change.
Hi, hello, my name is Andres Cabrera, and I'll be talking about agriculture and climate change, which is going to be one of the world's most affected sectors due to this natural phenomena. Next slide, please. So I'll be talking about the effects of climate change on agriculture as it relates to changing weather patterns, how it'll affect crop resiliency worldwide, how it will affect communities at a global scale and the inequalities that will become present due to these changes, and also discuss the effects of crop diversity in agriculture. Next slide, please. All right, so changing weather patterns will have a big impact in agriculture. It will have a big impact in change in precipitation, which can lead to increased precipitation in some parts of the world while decreasing precipitation in others. And this can result in droughts and many viable plots of lands that we currently have. It will also affect sea levels, as sea level rise can have a negative impact in freshwater availability, which can cause saltwater intrusion into aquifers, saltwater intrusion into wells that many farmers rely to give fresh water for their crops. But it can also cause some increased runoff into some of these freshwater systems that we rely on. Also, extreme weather will have negative impact in agriculture, as it can destroy agricultural land, equipment, and force farmers to look for more viable and suitable land in other communities. And now the graph in the left, shows some of the most vulnerable populations worldwide, which most of them will be near the equator and the subtropical regions of the world. Next slide, please. All right, so climate change will have several threats to cultivation. One of them is diseases. So changing weather patterns can cause crops to become stressed, which can make them more susceptible to diseases, particularly pathogen and fungal infections, which will also decrease their resiliency. So there's different crops that might be more resilient to climate change, but others might have more difficult time adapting. And this can have large-scale implications, especially here in the state of Florida, where cold weather produces a lot of the crops we eat during the spring and summertime, such as broccoli, carrots, spinach. So a shorter window time of cold weather can cause these crops to have lower harvest and put more stress on farmers. But also changing weather patterns can have a big impact on the introduction of invasive species, as invasive species can be vectors of many diseases, such as here in the state of Florida, we have the Asian citrus psyllid, which is the main vector of citrus greening, which is currently decimating many of the citrus groves in the States. So the graph on the left shows some of the greater impacts that some of these invasive species are having due to their introduction and more as they're able to establish themselves more due to climate change. Next slide, please. All right, so climate change will have a great impact in many communities. So most of the world's most vulnerable communities will be the most affected, as these communities may have lower resources or access to government funding to help them surpass many of the challenges that are presented. It will also change crop diversity in many of the crops that they have, so they might be forced to plant crops that are more resilient, but it might change the structure of the community, as many crops are tied into a lot of cultural aspects that they're found in. It might also reduce harvest worldwide. It is predicted by the year 2100, harvest can see a decrease of 24% due to climate change. And also this will bring on changing working conditions, which will bring more extreme heat, more extreme weather, and exposure to natural disasters, which can become dangerous to a lot of farming communities and workers in the state and worldwide. Next slide, please. All right, and now Hurricane Ian is a perfect example of how climate change is creating more extreme disasters and weather phenomena. So according to the University of Florida Institute of Food, of Agriculture and Sciences, Hurricane Ian caused over $1 billion losses in just agricultural damage in the state, which is one of the most damaging hurricanes reported. Over 5 million acres of agricultural land was affected, and all sectors of the agricultural sector was affected, but the citrus industry and the cattle industry suffered the most severe losses. And this relates a lot to Hurricane Irma, which struck just a couple years ago. So climate change will make these storms more stronger and more frequent, threatening our agricultural system here in Florida.
Awesome. And now we're going to transition to ocean acidification and sea level rise.
Hello, my name is Lara, and today I'm going to be speaking on ocean acidification and sea level rise and its effect on our daily lives. So what is it? Ocean acidification is an overall decrease in pH within the Earth's ocean. Now, this overall decrease happens over an extended period of time gradually. Sea level rise is an increase in the level of the Earth's ocean, and this is primarily due to and draws back to the effects of global warming. Causes of ocean acidification. Starting off is with raised carbon concentration in the ocean and the atmosphere. Whether carbon is being released in the atmosphere by human activities or the overall level of carbon dioxide gas increases in the ocean, the detriments to sea organisms and the general composition of the water is being greatly affected. Next is higher concentration of hydrogen ions in the water. An increase of hydrogen ions due to chemical reactions in the seabed can create a reaction with other gases, increasing the level of acidity in the water. Lastly, improper land management and industrialization. Improper agricultural methods by farmers can lead to an increase in soil erosion, leading to mass amounts of water to be impacted by acidifying soil minerals and an increase in water pollution. Looking into the ocean acidification rates, we can see that human activities such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and land use changes has caused an incredible increase in atmospheric CO2 concentration. As a result, more CO2 is being absorbed by the ocean, leading to a decrease in seawater pH levels and an increase in acidity. These rates have stayed consistent for multiple decades, especially in the increase of industrialization. Since the beginning of the industrial era, the ocean's pH has increased from 8.2 to 8.1, as you can see from the chart on the right. This has been an increase in ocean acidity by over 30%. Looking into the implication for coral reefs are highly sensitive to changes in the ocean's chemistry. The increase in acidity of seawater can make it difficult for corals to build their calcium carbonate skeletons. As a result, corals have become more vulnerable to damage and are less able to recover from disturbances such as storms and bleaching events. This can cause heavy impacts for marine life who use these reefs as protective habitats. Some examples of species directly impacted by the weakening of coral reefs are various sponges, oysters, clams, sea stars, and fish. More than 7,000 species depend on coral reef support. Now looking into the causes of sea level rise. First, looking into thermal expansion caused by the warming of the ocean. As the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans increase due to global warming, the ocean also expands and occupies more space. Looking into increased melting of land-based ice, the increase of global temperatures are causing ice sheets and glaciers to melt at an accelerated rate. These rising levels increase coastal erosion and elevates the possibility of storm surges. Now, bringing in an example back home, sea level rise in Florida, due to Florida's low-lying topography and extensive coastline, it's extremely vulnerable to the effects of sea level rise. Over the past century, there's been estimates suggesting that sea levels have risen around 9 inches since 1880. The rise in sea levels has increased flooding, erosion, and saltwater intrusion into freshwater aquifers. The area is expected to be continuously affected by sea level rise, as we can see from the map on the left, are coastal communities. Some examples being Miami Beach, Key West, Panama City, and Pensacola. Now, why is this an important issue, or less formally, why should we care? The environmental impacts are catastrophic, with a loss of habitat for marine life, decline of coral reefs, and erosion around coastal lines. This can also lead to health impacts for both humans and other species, affecting our food security and access to clean water. There can also be economic impacts, as there are many industries that are reliant on fishing and tourism. There's also social impacts. It can impact vulnerable communities who are reliant on these coastal resources for food and livelihood. And there's global implications. Addressing these challenges requires international cooperation and coordination. Now, what can be done? We can protect our wetlands. For example, as natural buffers for coastal lines, wetlands are important ecosystems that absorb surge waters. We could also support restoration. Inland areas, for example, dunes, are important in preserving our shores, and protecting them is very important to, let me rephrase that. It's important to support restoration. Inland areas such as dunes are important to preserving our shores. Protecting them by helping them remain intact is very important. We should also cut our emissions. To enact real action, we must cut down on our fossil fuel usage. Acting on climate change by reducing our pollutants and waste usage is the basis to any future solution. We should also push for climate action. Encourage your local officials to take action in addressing climate change in your city. These are just some of the examples of what can be done as individuals to help our planet, but the impact we can make on our community expands beyond. Thank you.
Great, and now we're going to move on to pollution and environmental justice.
My name is Amy Granados, and I'll be presenting on pollution and environmental justice. So environmental justice has been defined by the EPA as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Now, in the context of this definition, fair treatment refers to no group of people having to bear a disproportionate share of the negative consequences that come from climate change. Communities that do face disproportionate effects often have less political power, resources, and access to information, which only makes them more vulnerable to environmental hazards. Disproportionate effects of air pollution have historically been placed on people of color. This graph here on the right comes from a 2019 study that researched data on particulate matter originating from multiple sources, including passenger gas vehicles, construction, and fossil fuel production. These PM 2.5 pollutants are disproportionately emitted by the non-Hispanic white majority and disproportionately exposed to Black and Hispanic populations. The author of this research refers to this as either a pollution advantage or pollution burden, with the non-Hispanic white population experiencing the advantage because they experience 17% less air pollution exposure than what is caused by their own consumption. The Black and Hispanic populations experience the pollution burden, where they are exposed to 63% more air pollution. Being exposed to this level of air pollution comes with a string of negative health effects, which can include premature death in people with heart or lung disease, heart attacks, aggravated asthma, and increased respiratory symptoms. So issues of environmental justice and pollution are seen in every city in America. Here in Orlando, the Griffin Park neighborhood opened in the 1940s as Orlando's first affordable housing project. Less than 20 years after it opened, the construction of I-4 began, which was followed by the construction of the 408, with both roads completely surrounding the Griffin Park neighborhood, not only cutting them off from their neighbors, but also exposing them to higher levels of both air pollution and noise pollution from the thousands of cars that travel on those roads daily. A study from the University of New Mexico found that low-income and minority households are more likely to live near a high-volume road or in an area with higher traffic density. And as we just discussed, this can come with a number of negative health effects. An example of pollution in Orlando comes in the form of coal ash, which is residue from combusting coal for electricity and can contain mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, which are linked to cancer and other diseases. For multiple decades, residue from the Stanton Energy Center was dumped into nearby pits, creating a 90-acre coal ash landfill. In 2015, the EPA created national regulations for coal ash. However, these regulations did not include landfills that had already been closed. So because the Stanton Energy Center closed right before 2015, they were still allowed to dump their coal ash in the way they did without having any regulations. Following this, in 2018, a lawsuit was filed by nearby residents claiming ash contained heavy metals and radioactive material that they believed caused cancer clusters in the area. The lawsuit claimed that the contamination made surrounding areas a health hazard for residents, especially young children, and that the area should be fully cleaned up. As of 2016, OUC created a solar panel farm, which covered about half of the 80 acres that was left. However, there is still some coal ash residue remaining in the area.
Great, and now we're going to transition into urbanization and deforestation.
Hello everyone, my name is Heidie Cardona and I will be speaking with you about urbanization and deforestation. So what is urbanization? Urbanization is a process through which cities grow and higher percentages of the population begins to live in the city. This growth leads to the transformation of land for residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation purposes. This map, found in Our World in Data, represents the number of people living in urban areas around the world. It is astounding to see that in almost all countries, 60 to 80% of the population is living in urban areas. Apart from causing habitat loss and deforestation, urbanization can impact the earth in a variety of ways, including the evolution of life cycles and traits that help species survive and reproduce, biodiversity, interactions among organisms, the transmission of diseases, increasing the transport of invasive species, increasing regional temperatures, water runoff due to paving land with concrete, increasing erosion and decreasing soil quality, as well as decreasing the water quality by increasing sediment and pollutants in rivers and streams. Next slide. Urbanization can lead to disasters such as landslides. So with the population increasing and the demands for homes and infrastructures rising, Communities are at risk of many disasters. When people are pushed to build homes in unstable environments with coarse soil or lack of vegetation that anchor the soil in place, landslides can occur. According to the World Health Organization, between 1998 and 2017, landslides affected an estimated 4.8 million people and caused more than 18,000 deaths. So what is deforestation? Deforestation is the purposeful clearing of forested land. Throughout history and into modern times, forests have been raised to make space for agriculture and animal grazing and to obtain wood for fuel, manufacturing, and construction. So what is the driver of deforestation? That will be agriculture. In just over 100 years, the world lost as much forest as it had in the previous 9,000 years. Since 1990, it is estimated that 420 million hectares of forest have been lost through conversion to other land uses. As we can see on the graph, compared to 10,000 years ago in 2018, about 47% of the world's forests have been cut down and used for agriculture and urbanization. Next slide. So now we have some examples of mass deforestation around the world. By 2008, Africa was estimated to be suffering deforestation at twice the world average rate. According to the United Nations Environment Program, mass deforestation threatens food security in some African countries. One factor contributing to the continent's high deforestation rates is the dependence of 90% of its population on wood as fuel for heating and cooking. Deforestation in the Democratic Republic of Congo has been caused partly by unregulated logging and mining. The main cause of deforestation in the East African country of Ethiopia is a growing population and subsequent high demand for agriculture, livestock, and biofuel. In 1963, Kenya had a forest cover of about 10%. By 2006, it had only 1.7%. Since the arrival of humans 2,000 years ago, Madagascar has lost more than 90% of its original forest. And according to the FAO, Nigeria has the world's highest deforestation rate of primary forest. It has lost more than half of its primary forest in the last 5 years. And next slide. In South America, the cattle sector of the Brazilian Amazon, incentivized by the international beef and leather trades, has been responsible for about 80% of all deforestation in the region, or about 14% of the world's total annual deforestation, making it the world's largest single driver of deforestation. And now in North America, deforestation in Haiti is a severe environmental problem. Haitians burn wood charcoal for 60% of their domestic energy production. The history of most Central American countries involves cycles of deforestation and reforestation. Since the 1960s, cattle ranching has become the primary reason for land clearing. And lastly, in the United States, the US lost an average of 384,000 hectares or 949 acres of forest each year between 1990 and 2010.
Wow. So learning about all of this, it's kind of hard to feel like we can take action. It's hard to feel like we have power over the many challenges that we're facing on this planet that are pretty much caused all by human action. But we can almost be inspired by how much wrong we have done to think how much good we can do, because humans are powerful. We have done so much in the human race that we can actually reverse it too. So all that being said, individual action is essential to combat the effects of climate change because collectively we make up the entirety. So working together as a community or even just doing actions in your own life actually goes a really long way. And so we're here to inspire you to check with your local community activities wherever you live. I'm sure there's different nonprofits and organizations that you can get involved in. take action. And there's a few different ways that we think are the most important to focus on. So education, before you're able to do something about an issue, you have to first know about it and learn about it. So really educate yourself, even just reading blogs or, watching YouTube videos like this one. There are so many ways where you can kind of equip yourself with the information that you need in order to take action. And then go ahead and mobilize into boots on the ground action to combat climate change. Us at Ideas for Us, we have a lot of volunteer opportunities in our branches here in Florida, but also around the world, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Kenya, Nepal, Pakistan, Bolivia, where we're all solving global challenges with local solutions like reforestation and cleanup events and urban gardening. So there are a lot of organizations similar to us that are doing this that I'm sure you can find in your community. But you can also start your own, activate your community around these solutions that you can come up with as a team collectively, and work together to create these solutions. But one of the most important parts is also using your voice. So this can mean a lot of different things, but educating the people around you goes a really long way. A lot of people got into the environmental field and got passionate about it because of learning about it from a friend or a teacher. So make sure to spread the word on your social media, and word of mouth. It actually goes a really long way, and it's really powerful. The influence that you have is really strong. So make sure to use your voice and educate others, but also make sure to vote and be very educated before you go to the polls, especially in the United States. There's a lot of different things on the ballot, whether it's local elections or bigger elections. It's really important to be very aware of what you're voting on. So, whenever this time comes, please use your voice because it does count. But us at Ideas for Us, we're doing a lot of different environmental action in all the sectors that we talked about today. So we would love to have you join our newsletter just to stay informed and get some good news. But we'd also love to have you follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Ideas for Us Global, or you can follow our local chapters as well. We have 13 branches now, 3 in Florida and 10 internationally. So we're doing these projects all over the world, and we would love to have you get involved just by supporting and sharing our stories, or even donating to a project. There's so many different ways that you can take action, but we would love to invite you to be a part of this Ideas for Us family and Ideas for Us story. But thank you so much for learning with us today, and make sure to continue to learn and educate yourself through different YouTube videos on Ideas for Us, and take action, because together we can really make a difference. Thanks for watching. How do I stop recording?